And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin Bible podcast.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Talkin Bible with Rohan Bell. And this week, sitting down with Jeff Baxter. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, Pastor Rohan. It's great to be back again, talking Bible with you.
Yeah, we're talking Bible.
We are talking Bible.
We're not talking Bible. I got in trouble for saying talking Bible.
Did I say G accidentally?
You did. You said G accidentally.
No.
But we are talking Bible.
Talking.
That's
and talking.
Walking and talking about Jesus. We're going to walk the walk and talking the talking.
I like it.
So today we're talking about Matthew 24, the part of the famous Olivet Discourse.
That's right, yeah.
Jesus talking to the disciples on the Mount of Olives about all this weird stuff to do with end time stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
What's it mean? And still trying to unravel that after 30 years of Christian ministry. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I thought we probably should mention a little bit about that discourse, because this parable on its own doesn't make much sense at all.
Put it in its context.
Yeah, that's right. We need to have a little, look behind it and probably, in front of it as well. And so what Jesus is talking about, like you just alluded to, he's talking about signs of the ends of times. And so he's talking about things like back in verse in chapter 24, back in verse 4 through 15, he talks about there's going to be deception, there's going to be false messiahs, wars and rumours of wars, nations rise against nation, famines, earthquakes, there'll be persecution, you'll be put to death, he says. Many people will turn away from the faith and betray and hate each other. There'll be false prophets, there's going to be increases of wickedness. Love will grow cold in most people, and there will be the abomination that causes desolation. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen before the end of time.
Yeah. And the question is, what's he referring to? What end of time is he referring to here? Because those things pretty much describe everything you read describes history.
Yeah, it's
time and time again, doesn't
every
it?
Every day.
Yeah. People say to me, "Oh, the days are dark," and I'll open up Matthew 24. I'll say, "Well, what do you think it was like living in the Middle Ages in this stuff? What do you think it was like living in the some parts of the world?" So he's describing the human condition, the human problem of wars and rumors of wars and abominations and all this sort of stuff. So and the question begs is what is he discussing here? Is he discussing? Because the question he's answering, he's asking at the bottom, that he's asking at the start of the chapter, they say, look at these beautiful buildings, look at these amazing buildings in this temple. How great is this? And Jesus says, you see all these buildings, they're all going to come crashing down. And then he goes, well, when? And then Jesus launches into this discourse, which one minute you think he's talking about Jerusalem, the next minute you think he's talking about the end times, and he seems to conflate the two together and it gets confusing, and people have been trying to unravel that. I think the most likely thing is that he's talking about the human condition and the human problem. Societies come, societies rise, societies fall, and that has been and continues to be the way the world is until ultimately the end, the final end, when Jesus comes to set the world right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's in that context that he says these words. Yeah. About the fig tree.
Mm-hmm. I think, though, that we shouldn't dismiss that we might be in the end times, because it's important probably throughout history that people have prepared, Christians have prepared for the end times, even if they're not for another 1,000 years or whatever.
Always be prepared.
Still prepare for it.
Yeah, and we talked about that when we were talking about the parable of the bridesmaids right back in well, it's only a few hours ago as we record this, but a few months ago. Yeah. And yes, we should be prepared and live as though we are in the last day. Yeah. But not try and conduct or plan our whole world as though it is the last day, so we just go into lockdown and store all our stuff and keep it all. That's where cults go crazy with this sort of stuff. That's right. But live prepared, live ready for the end times. As if Jesus was to call us or Jesus was to return today, we'd be ready. That's right.
And we'll talk a little bit about that as we sort of move on. So let's have a look at verse 32. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Okay, so learn this lesson after seeing that all this stuff's going to happen. Yep. Here's the lesson. As soon as its twigs get tender, and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Now, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking we don't all live in the bush or on a farm or whatever. And for those of us that live, and this is probably a bit of a funny one, but for those of us that live in a city, shall we say, if we happen to go into a shopping centre, a shopping mall, and we hear Mariah Carey singing, you know, All I Want for Christmas or whatever it is.
It's usually about August.
Yeah, I know. We know that it's close to Christmas.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that.
I first started thinking when we see hot cross buns, we know it's nearly Easter.
You just know that it's just Boxing Day is what you know.
But
That's
anyway,
right.
you know.
I know the point. I get the point of what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
A sign of something that is coming, a
That's
sign of
right,
the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's lots of things
Indicators.
that we know. You know, when we hear cicadas, we go,
Yes.
it's nearly
Yep.
summertime in Australia.
All that sort of stuff.
You know,
Yep.
Summer
You
in
got it.
Australia.
Yep.
So anyway, righty up. Let's go on verse 33. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. So you know that it's near.
Mm-hmm.
So is he saying that when we see all that stuff we talked about earlier, you know, the hatred in men and wars and all that sort of stuff, that we will know that the end is near?
Yeah. Well, that's a valid question, and that's what people have used and have taken this to mean throughout history. This is why you get cults starting going, well, look at the history right now.
Yeah.
They wave a newspaper in one hand and the Olivet Discourse in the other, and they say, look at what's happening in the world. You know the time is near, therefore I'm going to predict a date of Jesus' return. And the thing is, people have been doing that for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So it must mean something different to that.
Yes.
It has to mean something different to
Mustn't
that.
it? Yeah.
It can't be meaning that the moment you see wars and rumours of wars and et cetera, that they are the sign that Jesus is going to come back. Otherwise, he would have come back any time in the last 2,000 years. So it can't mean that. So I go, okay, well, what else can it mean? And I think we need to then get this awareness of this nearness or this presence or this readiness, which is what we're talking about, being ready as if it could come.
Yep.
And also being aware that, as Peter says, you know, to the Lord a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. He's not slow. Peter says he's not slow in fulfilling his promises, as some are accusing him of doing, but he's patient, not wanting any to perish, but that all should come to repentance. So any delay is an invitation into life for us and for those around us. So any slowness, that's the reason.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better way to look at it. So when he's talking about the ultimate end time, if you can hear that noise, folks, I don't know if we'll try and filter it out, but there's just some concrete drilling going on downstairs, but hopefully it won't show up too much on the podcast. Apologies if it does. But yeah, so there seems to be some awareness here that the end is coming, but don't spend your time predicting it. And then, because then he goes on and says, I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things have taken place. So I go, okay, well, what generation is he talking about?
Yeah, that was my question to you. What does that mean? This
yeah.
you know, the word generation there, I suppose we need to know what that actually means.
And then can it be used figuratively? So is he talking about the generation, the post-church generation? Like, is he talking about we're still in that same generation, or is he talking about a generation, like one generation? And I don't think scholars have ever fully decided or settled on what Jesus meant here. So to me to tie a bow around it and tell you what it means is probably foolish. Yeah. I think that one of the arguments I've heard, which does make a lot of sense to me, is if you link this with the parable of the fig tree. The fig tree is the symbol of Israel. There's fig trees all over Israel. Mm-hmm. And so at least at one level, Jesus here is referring and prophetically declaring the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, which we know for a fact because that was the conversation starter. Look at these temples.
Yep.
Look at these beautiful stones. And Jesus says none of these stones will be left on another. And so he's predicting something that's going to happen some 40 years later when Jerusalem will ultimately be judged. And Jesus will say the reason Jerusalem was actually judged is because they didn't recognize the timing of the coming of their Messiah. They didn't recognize him. So the ultimate judgment Jerusalem receives this time around was their failure to recognize their Messiah. And it happens 40 years later. And so when it links the fig tree in there, the link is this generation, meaning this age group, these people, some of you who are alive will still see the collapse of the kingdom. These things will happen. He says this generation will not pass from the scene until all these things take place. Well, 2,000 years later, we haven't seen all these things take place. But at one level, they did happen. they did happen in 70 AD. But I think the way we're supposed to read prophecy like this is cyclic. So if Jesus is predicting something happening in 70 AD, it's a repeat of something that happened in 586 BC when Jerusalem was captured. It's a repeat of the exile when they were sent out from the garden. It's a repeat of what happens, all of the concept of exile, being sent out from God's presence and being punished for humans failing. Sure. We'll find its ultimate fulfillment in the return of Christ and the defeat of evil. But until that point, there'll be a repetition, a cyclic pattern of these prophetic insights. Yeah. I know that doesn't tie a bow around it. I know that's complex, but and end times people have tried to tie that bow around it and try to make it fit. Yeah. But that's not the way the ancients read prophetic literature. They didn't try and tie it to a calendar. It wasn't seen as this happens, then this happens, then this happens. That's not how they saw these things. And I don't think Jesus is trying to do that either.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's good. Let's have a look at verse 35. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Well, that's encouraging.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Everything he says will remain.
Yep. So if Jesus says something is going to happen, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
The when is inconsequential in the grand scheme of life.
That's right.
We think it's consequential. When will you come to pass? When will you answer my prayer, Lord? When will this word happen? And Jesus is going, actually, that when it will happen is not as important as that it will happen.
Yep. I've said it's going to happen, so just,
trust
me. It's
That's
going
right.
to happen eventually.
Yep. One day he will wipe away every tear. One day. It may not be this day, but one day he will. So we hold on to that hope. Hopefulness is one of our, true north values here at Anchor Point Church. We will hold on to that hopefulness that one day he will right every wrong and wipe away every tear.
Yeah, exactly.
He said it, and the universe will disappear, but that will still come to pass.
Yeah. It's comforting, isn't it?
It's
really comforting.
A huge source of comfort. Yeah. It keeps us hopeful in dark times, in challenging times, definitely.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's
it for that one?
It's only a short one.
It's only a short one.
It's a goodie.
Yep. Well, we'll probably spend a lot more time this year in this chapter anyway, and we'll just be still as confused. But that's just one little bit there about the fig tree.
Yep, sure.
All right. We'll talk to you everyone tomorrow.
Okay. See you then.